atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host and editor and best birthday gift giver.
Oh, thank you. Hello, dear listeners. I am Rex.
And we are back at it again for episode 97.
Oh, no. The big number is approaching faster and faster and faster. Oh, no.
Yeah, I was actually on the phone with, I want to say it was Michael. It was Michael, a friend of the podcast, Michael. I was on the phone with him earlier, and I was like, honestly, or no, it was not Michael, it was Grattan. I was on the phone with a couple people today, so I'm a little blurry on who it was. It was Grattan. And I was like, yeah, like we have this big plan for 100, and it's coming fast.
I don't like that it's coming fast. Can it slow down a little?
It was...
Oh, wait, no, it's not going to.
The weird thing about it is, like, you and I were talking about it, and we were prepping. We're like, oh, God, like, how are we going to, like, plan this out so we don't have any more episodes out before it? Remember? Like, we were kind of struggling because we were like, we have to go, like, we can only do this many episodes, right?
I vaguely remember, yes.
And then suddenly it's like, wait a minute.
Why are we here already?
There's only 2 episodes to be recorded, and then we're at the big number.
Right. Big number's scary.
Yeah, I don't... It's weird. It's so weird.
It just feels wrong.
It kind of does. Like, it feels like we're kind of legitimate now. Does that make sense?
See, I don't know if it necessarily makes it feel like we're legitimate. It's just like, whoa. We've done it. We've done this that many times, huh?
Yeah, and that's, when I say legitimate, that's literally what I mean. It's just the fact that, like, we've done this so many times. That's in a movie, isn't it? Like, oh, we've done this already. Like, what is it? I want to say it's a Marvel movie where it's like, yeah, we've done this already so many times. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know. Maybe I'm going crazy.
I think you are.
Just like, you know, we've done this.
Big numbers getting to your head. Maybe TJ Storm's getting to your head.
You know, he's definitely gotten to my head a couple times. So we are here. Rex, how have you been?
Oh, doing absolutely splendid at the moment after surprising someone with what I would call my best gag gift that I've ever given to someone for their birthday.
And you know, that gag gift might have actually been the best gift, period.
Good. I don't know how anyone could top it.
I honestly, like, no joke here. I honestly don't know how anybody can top that. So, in case anybody's wondering, today, as of this recording, literally like 30 minutes ago or something, I was legitimately born many years ago.
Happy birthday to you. Oh, wait, we'd get copyrighted.
Is that a birthday? Is that copyrighted?
Yeah, that song's copyrighted.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know if it's... No, I'm pretty sure it's still under copyright, the song.
Just do the Japanese version.
Unfortunately, I don't know the full Japanese version, unless you want me speaking with just a straight-up racist accent.
I honestly...
Which I don't particularly feel like doing.
If I remember correctly, the song in Japanese is literally just pronouncing it with katakana, like, pronunciations.
Yeah.
Because wouldn't it be like, ha-pee? Ha-pee? Your...
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Would be how it's said in katakana.
Yeah. And that's literally what it is. And so it would come across more racist.
I'm not singing it like that. I feel like that's kind of a bit... I wouldn't do that.
But thank you, Rex. I really appreciate the thoughts.
I waited 6, 7, 8 months, something like that, to pull that off. And goddamn, I'm so glad I kept that in mind for that long.
and now I can officially say that Godzilla truly wished me a happy birthday.
He did. And your favorite one at that.
I'm not going to comment on that part.
The one you have the most personal history with at that.
That is true.
Happy birthday, Alicia.
For anybody who's curious about this mythical video, it's 100% by the time this episode's gone live, it has been posted everywhere. On all of my socials, it will be there. I don't know if the KC account will retweet it. I'll leave that up to Rex. I'm not that selfish, but
I think you should. I think some people would like context for all 3 listeners. They'd like context, I'm sure.
We haven't made that joke in a while, Rex.
I don't remember the first time we made that joke.
We used to do that joke all the time, and then we kind of stopped because we were proven wrong. But this was like 3 years ago. That's how long ago we were making that joke.
Oh, that explains why I don't remember.
Yeah, you don't remember. Well, clearly you remember stuff from 7-8 months ago somehow, but I think that's kind of like the cutoff point.
Oh no, I just don't know how I remembered that for so long. I just remembered it because it was such a good prank, bro.
Well,
otherwise I can't remember anything past 2 weeks. Past 2 weeks ago, probably.
I'm kind of the same way, but that's mostly because I do so much like.
Well, yeah, you're just insane and have no sleep, so it makes sense you wouldn't remember anything.
Right. No, like today I had like 2 meetings. I had to write a pitch. I had like 3 calls plus podcast prep. And I was supposed to like do other things. I ended up not doing some of those. So it's yeah, I can kind of relate.
But to answer your question, I've been pretty good. I haven't done anything too crazy. Mostly just been setting up for like a small party, more of a gathering
Party
rather than a party per se. Yeah, just a small gathering of some friends of mine.
What's the context?
I just haven't. It's been a little while since all of us have been seen each other as a full group. Literally, the last time was my birthday party. So I'm like, I may as well just invite the whole group.
There you go. That's a nice little idea.
Yeah. So I've been preparing for that. Outside of that, I've been trying to get back into the gym finally because I've been pretty could have been doing better. I'll say that.
Right. Yeah, because I remember you I want to say it's when you started uni. That was when you kind of fell off of not only studying Japanese, but going to the gym.
Well, gym, I think I fell off a little bit before that. But yeah, no, I've been trying to get back in on that because I'm like, man, I've really been noticing like my stamina in particular has actually been just really bad. I used to I just straight up have completely lost a lot of my stamina, and I already wasn't someone who had like a huge amount of stamina to begin with. So I'm like, okay, no, I need to get my stuff together. I need to really start going back and just doing at least a bit more exercise a day, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, yeah. Got a couple friends together to help me come back, and yeah, so hopefully I'll be a bit more consistent again finally. Hopefully I'll build back some of the muscle I've lost, Not that there was a lot, but there was at least a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, outside of that, I've done more, but I can't. I'm blanking on it. See what I mean? About 2 weeks ago, maybe I should change it to 2 days ago. Maybe that's as far as my memory extends, I'm afraid.
That sounds about right. That's kind of for me.
But how about yourself? How was this beautiful occasion of a birthday? I know it just went up to absolute perfection like an hour ago.
Well, not to bring down the attitude, but that might have been peak. That honestly, my birthday probably peaked at 4 a.m.
As it should. As it should. Nothing can top a message from TJ Stone,
Yeah. Honestly, I don't see, because we're gonna be recording. I'm sure after the recording, I'll check my phone. I'll get more messages, which I greatly appreciate, and then I'll go home, go to bed, sleep for a couple hours, wake up, get ready for work, go to work, and just work until about 11:30, 12ish, and that'll be it. I don't. It's not that occasional, not that crazy. So at least I will say this. At least I can say that my birthday had the best gift ever.
See, and that's all you could ever ask for, the best gift or experience.
Yeah, and honestly, that's probably how I will look back at this. Is like, well, it peaked at 4 a.m., but you know what? It was the best peak it's ever been.
You've never gotten a gift quite like this before.
I haven't. I had to walk away. I couldn't let you see or hear what happened after.
Oh, I'm sure many tears were shed.
Couple. But that's neither here nor there. So, outside of that, I mean, since last recording, it's been a lot of working. I still, as of last recording, I had just basically gotten off of my big work week, right? Working about 85 hours. And so, the following day I had to work, and I had to work late. And then the following day after that was the last day of having to really hold my own weight because I didn't have anybody. Then on Monday, I started getting help again, and by Tuesday, everybody was back, so I got to kind of relax a little bit. But even then, I still worked. I ended up pulling another 52-hour week this week. But that's way better than last week. I mean, I basically did double. So
yeah, but I'm sure by a fair few people, that's more than full time for a lot of people. That's more than what a lot of people are working. So
right. But either way, I mean, Wednesday I actually got to go to bed and wake up naturally. And I kid you not, it was so weird waking up naturally and waking up happy. Like it had been so long since then. I mean, it had been about a week and a half that since I had woken up naturally and woken up happy and realizing, hey, I have a day. And it was kind of weird. And it was kind of surreal to actually get to enjoy myself for a day. So this week's been a better week. I will give it that.
Well, that's good at least.
Yeah, I ended up shopping a lot. Actually, that day I still had a meeting, but it wasn't work related, or it wasn't main day-to-day job work related. It was actually related to G-Fest, which I don't know how much I can talk about, but I did do some more G-Fest prepping, packed a little bit more, got it all set, and got a itinerary. This will be the first year I actually have a set itinerary that I'm going to be following that admittedly fills my weekend up a lot. I actually don't really have a lot of breathing room, especially considering I still have to schedule a dinner, a meeting, and I think 2 other dinners. So I still have a lot to do.
Right.
And I only have so many hours left in my weekend. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's still going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to be doing stuff I love. I honestly, and I told a friend this, even though there's not going to, like, I'm going to have to wake up at like 7:30, 8 a.m., and I'm going to be going until 12 or 1 a.m. So it's going to be long days, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's going to be long days and I'm going to be going from place to place, presenting or filming or writing or taking pictures or whatever, and keeping busy and doing a lot of things and representing multiple different people and places and things, multiple outfit changes. I'm going to have to bring like 7 or 8 outfits. I'm going to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be fun. And there's like at least one meeting a day for me. Even though it's busy and it's a lot of stuff, that's what I want to do in my life. I would rather have 2 meetings, 3 events, and 1 presentation to do every day than go to my regular job. Just because it would be a little different, each of those things I'm doing, and it's stuff that I actually like doing.
Right.
But that was what that whole meeting was about. Outside of that, I actually I did stream. I did a Kaiju Conversation live stream with Miss Kim, Kaiju Kim, where we talked about G-Fest, talked about content creation, and just living life. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. And, I've been working on a secret project that I can't really talk about that you know about, Rex, that hopefully comes to fruition. This is like one of those projects where it's like, I don't know if it'll even happen. I have to make a pitch for it.
I'm excited for it. I want to see where this project will go. I have faith.
Speaking of projects, another thing that happened this week, actually yesterday, the Titanic Creations Younguri figure got fully funded. Every single item that was on the crowdfunding list got funded. So not only are you going to get a horn beam, the fire breath beam, but you're going to get tanks, helicopters, jets, that stands for all those, oil barrels, destructible bridge, and a special gate from the film. And that was one of my biggest contributions to the action figure, was proposing that gate. And seeing all the excitement for that gate the other day was really exciting. And now we have the full set. So you're going to have a huge diorama for your Younguri figure, and I'm so happy for that.
Yeah, no, congratulations on that to not only you, but also everyone at Titanic Creations.
Thank you. It's honestly, it's really weird to like realize that something you worked on got every goal they like it had. And, I'm going to be able to see the prototype here in a couple weeks at G-Fest. By the time this goes live, I think it'll be the day like before G-Fest starts when this episode goes live. I can't wait.
Yeah, it would be about that.
So anybody who's listening on their way to G-Fest, go to the Titanic Creations table at the Kaiju World Vendors Hall and check out the prototype for Younguri. It should have all of the bonus features there. They'll probably have a couple other cool things. I'm so excited for it. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to take some pictures of it. Can't wait to finally meet Mac and the team and get to actually in person talk to them. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm envious of the fact that you are going to G-Fest, man.
Well, I want you there. I want you there.
Yeah, one day. But for now, all I get is my envy.
Well, I'll call you and we'll video chat. You'll get to see the place. Actually, that's a really good idea.
Okay.
I like that idea. Like maybe video chat in the morning before you go to bed, and like at night I'll show you the empty halls. I like that. I like that. That's what we're gonna do.
Alrighty.
It's been decided. It's canon. It's in audio recording. It could be technically in writing if there's a transcription. It's gonna happen. So that's really all I've been up to. It's been busy, working, doing these other side things. I haven't really had a lot of time outside of that.
That's unfortunate. have you at least watched any Tokusatsu?
I unfortunately have not. I don't think I've actually watched anything. Now that I think about it, I think I've just been so busy I've not.
I mean, I can't even really criticize you that much this week because I haven't watched any either.
Oh no. Well, I guess we can talk about a Tokusatsu adjacent thing instead, because we did get confirmation, even though I thought we knew this a couple weeks ago. When I saw this news, I was like, I thought we already knew that.
What are you talking about? The the new MonsterVerse film release date?
Yeah, MonsterVerse 6 or Godzilla Kong follow-up looks like those are the titles that I'm seeing for it.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing a Warner Brothers event film slated for, March 26, 2027? And I'm like, yeah, that's probably the next MonsterVerse film.
And see, everybody was saying it was going to be the next MonsterVerse film, so it was like, well, I thought we knew. Like, that's why when this announcement came out, I was like, I thought we knew this.
I mean, it's just nice to have official confirmation, I suppose.
I mean, I've seen people like, I haven't seen anybody angry at this, but I've seen a lot of people saying, I don't know why people are angry at this. It's only 3 years. That was the difference between Godzilla versus Kong and Godzilla Kong the New Empire. Have you seen anybody actually upset at this?
I don't think so. I've seen a couple people. The closest thing I've seen to someone being upset about it is like, they should bring back the MonsterVerse movies to releasing in May instead of March for some reason.
I think it's funny.
Know why. I mean, look, I think it's an inevitability that it's a bit of a MonsterVerse tradition, delays.
Right.
So, I see that coming someday.
Yeah, but I'm going to because I am curious, because every MonsterVerse film has seen at least 1 to 2 delays. And in like GXK's, it got delayed to, if I remember correctly, it was like March, and then it got delayed to April, and then it got moved.
It was originally March, then it went to April.
And then it went back to March, and then it got delayed by a week again.
Or was it pulled forward a week?
It was one of the two, but it was like 3 times it got moved.
Yeah, something like that.
So I'm going to be curious if it does get moved. You actually bring up a good point, the March release date or early April. This actually, we can kind of trace this back all the way to 2018 and 2017. Typically, Warner Brothers will put its blockbuster film there, because we saw that with Kong Skull Island. We saw that with Ready Player One. I don't remember anything in 2019, but 2020 was going to be Godzilla vs. Kong, and then that became 2021's film. And here we saw Godzilla Kong the New Empire the same way. So they do that. That's like the beginning of the summer. That's where you put your films that they don't have the faith in that they will actually succeed in a crowded summer. You put your films in March or April to get that money. And I think it comes back to, like, Kong Skull Island, obviously it's a Kong movie. You're like, ooh, what's going to happen here? And then Ready Player One was a new IP film, so obviously that's why that happened. And then they put King of the Monsters in that summer slot, which, as we know, historically made it bomb. Not bomb, but underperform.
Right.
And I think that gave Warner Brothers cold feet to even humor that idea again, which is why for GVK and GXK, we got that. I wonder if Space Jam 2 had that same situation.
But yeah, no, GXK free, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm not thrilled on the thought of another Godzilla Kong movie. I'm not thrilled about another MonsterVerse movie. But with the changes we're seeing, first of all, I thought they were going to rush this for a 26-27 production.
No, I always saw it as, I didn't see 2026 as a possibility. And if it was going to happen, then that probably would not end well.
Right,
frankly.
and that was what my biggest concern was. Oh, if they do a 26 slate for this, that's not a good sign. But the 27 release date does give me hope. The new director gives me hope. The current writer's kind of iffy, but I expect more to happen in the writer's
Dave Callahan?
Yes.
I'm like, whatever. I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
It's. I'm happy to hear Rossio
It's gone.
gone. We don't need any other. We don't need that racist coming back. I think he's racist. He's the racist one, right?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he's the racist one.
You heard it here first, folks.
Allegedly. But I'm pretty sure he is.
I don't know.
But alas, let's get rumors and stuff out of the way. Nonetheless, I'm, like I said, cautiously optimistic is, I think, the best word.
Yeah.
But, I'm, as much as the MonsterVerse is like, it's a complete mixed bag, it is like that series of Godzilla films that has kind of been with me and you now for like, it's the ongoing series of Godzilla films that has been around in our time. So, it's going to be a little bittersweet to say goodbye to it. So it's kind of a little nice having him still here,
Yeah. But nonetheless, I'm hopefully optimistic, which is something I think honestly for me, it's just the fact that we have officially taken out, from what we know so far, the entire team behind the last two films, which made me not like them.
You make it sound like they've been assassinated. They got murdered for crimes against Godzilla.
That's funny.
Are you making August Ragone proud?
I was gonna say that. Adam Wingard is the Ryuei Kitamura to my August Ragone. Adam Wingard committed war crimes against Godzilla.
Oh dear God.
I hope one day somebody makes a joke about me and they say that.
Oh dear God.
That would make me happy. I don't know if it's supposed to make me happy, but it would make me happy. But no, I'm really excited. That means for the next 3 years, you and I are going to be talking about any update we really see of worth.
But hey, in the meantime, we'll get Monarch Season 2.
This is true.
Which would be filming as this episode comes out, actually.
Sweet. So you better be going to see some of that filming, Rex.
If I can find location.
I believe in you. If I can
find the location, I'll sneak on set right now.
I'll believe in you.
I unfortunately don't see it happening, but we'll see.
Try it.
I would.
But speaking of seeing is believing. And we need to talk about a movie. Did you see any movies?
Well, there might be one. I saw like this weird, obscure, funky Japanese movie known as Kujiragami.
Killer Whale?
Or The Whale God, if you want to translate it more literally.
Oh! I did. It's funny you bring that up because I watched that too.
Oh, good.
Did you
Finally,
know?
We'll have something to talk about.
Did you know that it actually came out almost on the release date of this episode?
I was actually going to bring that up. I realized that like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, it came out July 15th, 1962, which this episode comes out. I want to say it's the 11th. So we're about 4 days
10
shy.
11, something like that.
Yeah, so we're just about 4 days shy of the, what would this be, the 62nd anniversary.
Yeah.
That came out on 1962.
4 days shy, that's basically the anniversary day.
Yeah. It also came out in Hawaii around that time, too. That's the only release this film had outside of its Japanese release until SRS Cinema put it out on Blu-ray, VHS, and soon-to-be DVD last year.
Right. So are we going to cover this or what?
Yeah, I'd be down. Do you want to go over our history with the film a little bit before we dive into it?
Well, I really don't have much of a history of relating to this film outside of it was something that had been recommended to me for a while, and this is my first time watching it. I know you, on the other hand, have a little bit more.
Yeah, outside of, like, to be honest, I actually explained this. I've covered this film already. I hope to cover it in more depth here. But in that recording, I do bring up how, for me, this was one of those films that after you do the Godzillas, the Gameras, the Ultramans, and then you spread out to, like, the Gappas and the Gulalas, and from the Kaiju you go to the Tokusatsu and the Henshin heroes. Like, after you kind of branch out and continue to dive in, this comes up as one of your obscure Kaiju films. And so I knew of its existence. I knew that Arrow Video actually planned on getting the rights to it at one point, but SRS was already trying to, and because of Katakawa and Arrow, they kind of pulled out, and then Arrow Video stopped doing it, probably because Franz Simoni, the head acquisitioners manager of Arrow Video, stepped down and started his own company. SRS finally got it, which was really cool. And then, prior to the release of the film, I actually was attached to some bonus features that unfortunately did not end up happening. I'm going to talk about them here because it's my show. I didn't sign anything, and I was merely the producer of them. I actually wasn't really heavily involved with them outside of I was the editor and producer. And so one of them was going to be a compare and contrast to Moby Dick. A lot of people compare Moby Dick, the book, to this film. And then the other was an audio commentary that got recorded, and the video essay with the Moby Dick comparison, the script was done, but we still had to film it, edit it, and submit it, and then the commentary we had to edit. It got recorded, but it wasn't edited. Unfortunately, some issues behind the scenes happened, and neither of them got attached. It's okay. That stuff happens. It's just the name of the game. We weren't fast enough, and, it works. We still got to do an episode that's really pretty good on it. I actually, while watching the movie tonight, I actually put on the podcast recording, and it worked almost like a commentary track. I thought it was pretty funny. So, yeah, that's kind of my history with it. I ended up doing an episode on a podcast about it, and then we had this slated for our Kaiju month this month, and here we are.
So do you think we should start diving into a little bit of the background of the film, or?
Yeah. So where should we start with this? I could start pre-God Whale, pre-Whale God, kind of talking about the effects for Daiei, if you want me to. Okay.
Sure, that's not where I would have started, but now you've got me curious.
Yeah, so here's an interesting tidbit. So the Whale God does predate Nezura and Gamera the Giant Monster, right? This came out in 1962. Right. It doesn't predate the Demon of Mount O or Buddha, which were two of the other tokusatsu films they had produced prior, and there's a handful of other ones.
Right. Mount Oe was the same director, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Now, we all know that in 1954, Toho produced Gojira, right? And then Half Human, Godzilla Raids Again, Rodan, et cetera, it goes on. By the time Whale God came out, they had already produced almost, 10 feature films that were giant monster tokusatsu-esque?
Right, something around that, yeah.
So, and that's all thanks to the mastermind of Eiji Tsuburaya, right? The man who created miniature effects pretty much, not in general, but like for the Japanese film industry, the men in suit ideas, all that. He actually is the one responsible for why we have the Whale God, Demon of Mount O, Gamera the Giant Monster.
Oh.
So, following World War II, we all know Eiji Tsuburaya got blacklisted for his effects in films such as, is it The Eagle of the Pacific? Where they thought his bombing of Pearl...
It's not Eagle of Pacific. I want to say it's the battle from Malay to Hawaii?
That sounds right.
Oh, I want to say it's that one. I don't remember the exact title.
Yeah, so that film...
Because Eagle of the Pacific is a 1953
That's right.
movie from Honda.
So his work on that film, the miniature effects were so convincing that he actually became a war criminal. And he got blacklisted from the Japanese film industry. So following World War II, Toho fired him. He ended up being a freelance artist, working whenever he could. He eventually got hired by Daiei. Now, he lost his job in 1946, I believe, late 46, early 47. Then he got hired by Daiei in 47, and then he established the Tsuburaya Special Skills Research Institute in 1948, which Daiei would use for their films. He ended up being the mentor for the special effects units of Daiei Studios, which that would be Daiei's special photography department that was established in 1946. That department was at Daiei Tokyo, which is one of the two main studios for Daiei. They specifically, I want to say that was where a lot of their Gamera films. No, that was Daiei Kyoto.
Daiei Kyoto did a lot of the Gamera stuff.
But anyways, so Tsuburaya worked at Daiei Tokyo.
I think Daiei Tokyo did Daimajin?
That sounds right. That sounds right. And
I'm
I believe
pretty sure
they
I read
did
that last episode.
And then I think Whale God was kind of both of them, I think.
Yeah, I know they did some filming. I know they definitely did like some water stuff in Daiei Kyoto. Yeah.
Yes. Now, this department of Daiei was overseen by cameraman Goro Watanabe and cinematographer Masuku Himada, who would leave shortly after it was established. And they would be joined by fellow Nikatsu Tamagawa Film Studio alumni, which that company later became Daiei, Toru Matoba, who is important to this film because he was actually the special effects director.
Right, even though it's credited under another guy's name.
Yeah, it's credited under, let me get you the exact name here.
Riki Komatsubara.
Yes, and this is that person's only credits.
Yeah. Yeah, but I couldn't find. I was trying to look for other credits for him, but I couldn't find anything.
Yeah. So I don't know why they wouldn't credit him as his actual name, but that was the case here. Now, Matoba and that whole department worked very closely with Eiji Tsuburaya.
Right. I mean, Matoba worked on Godzilla, didn't he?
Yes, he did. As consultant.
As well as interestingly enough, King Kong appears in Ito.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting, and he would go on to work on Ultra Q.
Yes,
wasn't it as well?
I have his whole filmography for the end here. He did a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, which I thought that was really interesting, actually.
Yeah. So you have somebody that worked on the original Godzilla here, but he also worked with Tsuburaya before Godzilla. And Tsuburaya helped this department and really helped establish their special effects department. They would work under him for all of Daiei's 1949 films that included special effects, which those films were Butsuta Busata's Red Lotus from February of 1949, an Edo period drama, Tanuki Palace Flower Competition, April 1949, Invisible Man Appears, September 1949, an adaptation of the H.G. Wells character, The Rainbow Man, July 1949, based on a mystery novel of the same name by Kikuo Tsunoda, and finally Ghost Train in August of 1949. So Tsuburaya worked on all of these films. Unfortunately, the only one available in the States is Invisible Man Appears. Right. And he would help establish how they did these special effects. But due to a lack of assets, Tsuburaya would leave Daiei following these films and would return to Toho, where they would actually purchase the Tsuburaya Special Skill Research Institute and give him an actual spot in the studio. And from there, we got eventually Tsuburaya Productions that would go on to create Ultra Q, Ultraman, and spiral into the major company it is today. So Tsuburaya is the whole reason that Daiei had a special effects department, essentially. And so all of the films following his departure, like The Invisible Man versus the Human Fly, Buddha, The Demon of Mount O, and The Whale God, all were done by his, what are they called?
Alumni?
No. His understudies. And so, yeah, in a weird way, Tsuburaya is the reason that Gamera even existed.
Which is strangely ironic.
Yeah. And even then, like, we just discussed how, like, Tsuburaya helped, like, give tips on Gamera versus Barugon.
Right.
So, yeah, it's really weird when you think about just how big Tsuburaya is for special effects in Japan.
Right. Well, there's a good reason why his name is so revered in Japanese film history to this day.
Right. And I mean, you can go all the way back to 1925's A Page into Madness, which included special mirror camera work that Tsuburaya worked on. He was not assistant director, contrary to what some Wikipedia pages say. He was too young, too inexperienced to have that role in that film. But he had worked. A lot of people don't realize, like, when he worked on Godzilla, he was already in his 40s.
Oh yeah.
He was well established in the film industry, and
I mean, but a lot of people in those roles, like special effects director, they usually are well into their 40s, 50s or so.
Right. And so it's really weird because, yeah, Tsuburaya, the whole reason Japan has special effects really and honestly rests on Tsuburaya's shoulders. And I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Definitely not quite to the extent of how important he really was.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the prehistory for the Whale God in terms of how we eventually got the film.
Yeah, but should also mention that Kujiwagami is also the name of a novel released just a year prior to this film by author Koichiro Uno in July of 1961.
Yeah, and that novel won the Akutagawa Ryunosuke Prize, which is why Daiei would purchase the rights to the book to be adapted into a film.
$1 million yen.
Mm-hmm. Funny enough, it actually ended up becoming a manga in 1971 and ran for 3 issues. Now, do you know the further connection that this book has on Daiei special effects films?
No, I don't think so, no.
So the author, Koichiro Uno, would go on to be a script writer in the...
Wait, are you talking about the Kaneko connection? Or?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I do know this.
Yeah. So he would go on to write and occasionally, I believe, direct a couple of Roman porno films in the 70s and 80s. Now, one of the films was the first debut film of Gamera Heisei Trilogy and GMK director Shusuke Kaneko. He would work on and direct Koichiro Uno's Wet Hit in 1984. And even before that, they would work on Koichiro Uno's Wet Learning in 1983, as Kaneko would help work on the script and was an assistant director on that film.
Right.
So there's an even deeper connection here.
Yeah, I thought that one was actually really cool.
Oddly enough, this film seemingly has a lot of different connections to the greater...
Loosely, but yeah, it really does.
Now, I don't really have much more in terms of pre-production. A lot of that's kind of... I mean, I do have some on the special effects if you want to go over those.
Sure, that's more or less what mine go to as well.
Well, I'll let you start us off here.
Well, speaking of Gamera connections, it's worth noting that Ryosaku Takeyama, whom we mentioned last episode as the guy who modeled Barugon, actually went prior to working on the Gamera series, would work on this film, making a small model of the titular whale god. In saying that, though, there was still a full-size whale scale model made by Fuminori Ohashi as well, at a length of 30 meters, costing about 8 million yen total.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting that we bring all this up. So, Ryunosuke Takayama's mentor was actually from Fuminori Ohashi.
Takayama, my bad.
Was Fuminori Ohashi's sorry, you got me mixed up here, sorry.
Sorry.
Ryosaku Takayama's mentor was Fuminori Ohashi, who actually also worked on King Kong Appears in Edo. He was a huge King Kong fan. He worked on Godzilla 54, Half Human, Throne of Blood, The Hidden Fortress, Yojimbo, Buddha, Satomi Hakenaden from 1959, Aegon the Atomic Dragon. He was a director on that one. Jungle Prince, Ambassador Magma, Monster Prince, Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds, and he was the special effects artist on Planet of the Apes.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Okay, that's actually really cool. I had no idea about that.
It's a little known factoid, but yes, they hired a Japanese special effects technician to create the prosthetic special effects for Planet of the Apes, and it was Ohashi-san.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's actually really cool.
Another connection.
That's actually legitimately really cool.
Yeah. So Ohashi's large whale was made for close-ups and interaction, and originally it was supposed to move around a lot more, but the 30-meter whale used hydraulics, but because it weighed 3 tons, it just wouldn't move. So they ended up just using it solely for those close-ups. Now, do we want to talk about Takayama's credits? Because he's got a huge amount of credits as well.
Right. I mean, from what I understand, he's considered one of the fathers of monsters in Japanese kaiju. So feel free to go ahead.
Yeah,
the credit he deserves.
So the ones I could locate were he worked on Buddha, Nezura, Ultra Q, Daimajin, Gamera vs. Barugon, Ultraman, Ultra 7, Monster Prince, Mighty Jack, Fight Mighty Jack, Return of Ultraman, Silver Mask, Lion Maru, Iron King, Assault Human, Fireman, Super Robot Red Baron, Denjin Zamborgar, Tiger Serum, Adventure Rockbat, Dinosaur Born Free, and he almost was the designer for Gorosaurus for King Kong Escapes.
Yeah. God, do you have any other surprise connections that I don't know about, or have you finally shown all your cards?
Well, I still got one big thing, but
God,
do we want to talk about the large pool? We already talked about how it was at Daiei Kyoto. Do you know what other films were shot there?
Not specifically. I'd presume like Gamera vs. Gauss and some of the other Showa Gamera stuff, maybe.
So the only stuff that I was given from that large pool I have here are like Invisible Man Appears, Rashomon, Ugetsu, Gate of Hell, Burning, Daimajin, Daimajin Strikes Back, Wrath of Daimajin, and Configuration.
The Toho film Configuration?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Was that after Daiei had died, or?
I'm guessing.
Actually, yeah, it might have been, because I want to say Daiei Kyoto died first.
That sounds
I could be wrong
right.
on the history.
That sounds right.
I could be wrong on the history. Don't quote me on that, but I want to say I've read that. So maybe Toho bought it off them or something.
Maybe.
That'd be funny.
I have one last thing, but it's going to be kind of a log thing, so I don't really want to jump into it until I feel like we're at a point where that's something to talk about.
Okay. We can wait on that then.
Plus, I feel like I've been talking a lot here. I don't want to bore anybody.
So in that case, I suppose we should move on into the film itself then?
Unless you've got anything else you want to throw out there?
Frankly, nothing too crazy. The only thing of note really is that the film, from what I could tell, is fairly accurate to the novel, but drops the main framing device of the novel, wherein which it's kind of like not quite a recollection, but like the novel is told from the perspective of a researcher whom is told the legend of Kujiragami from a family, and is shown an old picture scroll based on these events, and that inspires him to write the following story, essentially.
Oh, so it's like, oh, interesting. So,
which is kind of interesting when you there's a obvious comparison to Moby Dick, and that is based off the real partially off the real experiences of Herman Melville, but from my very limited understanding of Moby Dick, that is loosely also based off some real events that he had been told about.
Yes. Mocha Dick, which was a whole thing in a fishing village, which I don't. So, full disclosure, for our recording, I did not pull the compare and contrast the information of Mocha Dick, Moby Dick, and Japanese culture and whaling. I want to quickly throw this out there. Credit to DiManna for his whale research in Japanese culture, which you can hear on the Monster Island Film Vault, episode 86, The Whale God versus DiManna versus Elijah Thomas. In that episode, Danny has a beautiful dissertation on the culture of whaling in Japan, and Nathan and Danny are far more experienced in books than I am. They've read Moby Dick. They know Moby Dick.
Yeah, I have not read Moby Dick either, so unfamiliar territory to me, but I did do a little bit of looking just to get a bit of a grasp on the story of that.
So if you're interested in the actual comparison and contrast in cultural significance to the whale god, go listen to that episode. That's going to be probably your best source of information for that aspect, while we're going to cover more of the production, technical, and subjective side to the film.
Right. But yeah, that's about everything I think I wanted to mention before we get into it. So
I must say,
shall we begin?
I must say real quick that I do find it very interesting that it's stored. I do find it very interesting that it's told in that fashion in the book. I think that's more of because it's like the legend of the whale god, right?
Right.
Which I'm not going to dive too much into it again. Go listen to that episode if you want to. But there is actual ghost whale stories in Japanese mythology and in Japanese culture. So in a way, this could fall in line with that exact same thought process of like a ghostly whale, a godlike whale. Something that I will bring up, and that's, quote, the cycle of the whale god, which is something I think this film does showcase extensively towards the end.
I'm curious to hear more on that.
But yes, we can go ahead and dive right into the whale god. Rex,
I see what you did there. God damn it.
Yeah. Funny story is there's a ton of puns in the MIV episode as well. So,
oh God.
Yeah.
Sounds like you guys had a whale of a time there.
I made that joke about 20 times in that episode.
It's just such a good joke.
I know. Don't blow it out of the water, though.
Oh, shut.
I'm going to whale a lot of jokes onto you, Rex. I'm sorry.
No.
I know you're going to hongo some more jokes, too. So can I, Takashi, about your joke? No, it failed. I'm done. I quit. We're on to the movie. On to the movie.
That flopped. Well, things get going shockingly quickly as we jump straight into an attack from the whale, an attack on the whale god, actually.
Yeah, I was really surprised with how quickly the action jumped right in. Like it was
likewise.
right there.
Likewise. I was not expecting an effects-led film from this, and I would say it definitely is not an effects-led film. But so that really caught me off guard that the film just goes straight into the action.
Right. And I think a lot of kaiju fans, like, to be honest, this isn't really a kaiju movie. It's more of a tokusatsu film with some
right, but it's not even
subtleties.
really an effects-led film. The effects are really loaded into the opening 5 minutes, and then the back, and then like the latter 20 minutes at the very end. But otherwise, for most of the middle of the film, there really isn't much of any special effects work. Otherwise,
yeah, and so it's one of those things where I think,
which is not a bad thing, mind you.
No, it's not.
But if you go in, I can imagine it. If you go into the wrong expectations, I think some people would be a bit disappointed in that.
Absolutely. This film definitely follows, I want to say it's Martin Scorsese who said it. Obviously, they didn't take it from Scorsese, but Scorsese said it, and that is, you have 3 minutes to get your audience to be engaged with your film. After 3 minutes, they're not going to connect to it. And this film definitely knew that, and right away they give us a sequence with the whale god with some action and some death in it.
See, for me, I feel like this is the one scene of the movie that actually didn't work for me.
I'm going to be honest. I'm right there with you. It definitely, like, I get entranced.
I think it's too sudden. Like, just starting the movie instantly with action. I feel like I have no context of what's going on or why I should care.
And that's something I think the film does suffer from throughout it, is like, why should I care?
I don't know. I feel like the rest of the film is mostly doesn't really have that issue. It's just the opening 5 minutes. Sorry, the opening 5 minutes. I feel it's like, why should I care about what's going on? Like, you're just dropping me in the middle of this.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm just going to throw this right out the bat. Obviously, Akira Ifukube did the music for this. This does not work. I do not like the music we hear during this fight, this sequence, does not fit. It's kind of droning, and I just kind of am sitting there like, okay, there's a lot of stuff happening, right? It's just, there's stuff happening on screen. I recognize that there's like some pretty fast-paced editing, but for the rest of the film, it's not that way.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have much thoughts on Ifukube's music in this scene, just because the scene just kind of whiplashed me. I'm like, whoa, okay. It's just genuinely such a sudden sequence. But through the rest of the film, I'd say Ifukube's score is pretty understated compared to, say, the more bombastic music you'd hear in, say, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, if you compare this, so this came out in 1962, even if you just compare it to his King Kong versus Godzilla score, it's like night and day. Right.
I don't think the score is bad, mind you. It's just not going for the same bombastic tone as some of his other films. Which I think for the most part works here.
I think it works. I just think it's mostly forgettable.
Sure. I can somewhat agree with that. I think there's some nice tracks here and there, but it's definitely not as exciting as a lot of those Godzilla scores. But at the same time, that's not what it's going for.
Right. Now, I will say this, the miniatures look pretty good. We already talked about what kind of miniatures were used. I think they're pretty successful here, considering...
I'd say all the effects look pretty all right. At worst, they all look pretty all right. There's nothing crazy, super impressive here. Okay, outside of maybe actually, no, I'll take that back. The life-size whale actually does look quite good for the most part.
I think the hydraulics they use, for the eyes and whatnot, the face of the whale look good. Everything else, I think, is just kind of okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Not really anything major to say there. And honestly, I was really surprised by how brutal the fights are, both in the beginning and the end. I think they do a great job at like having some vicious action here.
Right. I mean, the fights throughout, like with the whale, but even with the people, they tend to be pretty scrappy, pretty, I guess, not quite realistic is the word, but I guess realistic in a sense.
Yeah.
Because they're less like, they're not like overly like choreographed fights. And there's not like a ton of like, when the action is with the humans, it's not like a ton of like quick cutting to very specific camera angles with like these like beautifully choreographed fights. But it ends up giving it a very realistic feel to them, which I appreciated. And I think and actually that's something I will give credit to is the fights. I think the way the characters fight tell you a bit about their characters as well, which is something I appreciated.
Right. Yeah. Now, to that, one of the issues I do have in terms of the execution of the characters, and this is more on an editing side, and you and I have talked about it, not on cast, I think, but I do think the ADR in this film is pretty shaky at best, but that's kind of to be expected.
I can forgive bad ADR as long as it's not like the worst thing ever. I can forgive it.
It's just noticeable. It's noticeable, not
sure.
But I will say one issue I think is the way that so this opening sequence is to establish the death of Shaki, our main character, the death of his grandfather, the death of his father, and the death of his brother.
Right.
That all happen at basically the same way within 3 minutes of each other.
Right.
And it's a little like, okay, I've seen it once, cool. Twice, oh wow. Third time, oh, okay. It felt very like back to back to back.
Right. And again, you don't really get any. See, I was talking about it with someone, a friend of both of ours, actually, Marcus. I was talking about it with him that I feel like I would have preferred it if the film didn't just start on these attacks. I wish it, at least maybe gave me some frame of reference for who at least like the grandfather or the father is, just like a scene right before the attack, just to give me some hint of an idea what they're like and give me some reason to care about what's happening in this opening.
Yeah. Because it honestly, like, the way that the father and grandfather die, it's literally like one falls in and then the other one walks up and then just falls in as well.
Right.
And it's very much like, okay, like, who are these people and why do they matter? Like you said, like, there's not really any establishment. And for me, one of my biggest problems, and I'm jumping really far ahead here, but for me, I just don't really get connected with any of these characters. I don't feel like any of them, we don't see them.
I think the characters writing of this film works pretty well for the most part. It's just, I feel like if the film gave me a reason to care for the deaths at the beginning, then I think I would connect even more. I think it would do a better job at connecting with our protagonist, Shaki, if we actually had a reason to care for the deaths of his family members.
Right. Especially since this is a 100-minute movie and within 10 minutes, our whole reason is done and over with.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, after so long, it just becomes, I'm going to avenge my family. And that's all it ends up being for the majority of the film. Which I'm not against a revenge film by any means, but I don't know. I feel like, as an example, like in Lady Snowblood, we're introduced to Lady Snowblood, and then we're introduced to the reason why she's going after these people. And we see her family before and after they're dead, and we understand the whole thought process behind it, and we're given a reason to care.
Yeah. That's probably my biggest issue with the film as a whole, is this opening sequence.
Yeah.
Just because genuinely just throws you straight in the deep end, so to speak.
That's funny. Yeah, and then, as soon as these 3 deaths are done, we're thrown into the whole thought process of, oh, I need to avenge my family, I'm going to kill the whale god. And then the elder of the village, played by Takashi Shimura, comes out like in a huge meeting on the beach, says that whoever can kill Shatsu, or the whale god, however you want to call it, will get his land, his name, and his daughter in marriage.
Right.
And this all just kind of happens, which I would 100% understand if I was given more context, but this kind of falls in line with the whole Ultraman Rising thing of like, this is definitely a world lived in. It feels like a world that's lived in, and we're expected to kind of just jump on in.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think I feel like I'm becoming a broken record, but just having another scene at the beginning before that attack, I think would do this film wonders.
Mm-hmm.
Or just maybe like restructuring the story a little bit.
I agree.
One or the other.
Another thing that's kind of there for me is in this opening sequence, we do get the introduction to the occasional appearance of the priest, played by William Hughes, who just kind of shows up and preaches a little bit and marries a couple people and then disappears.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a bit superfluous.
Yeah.
I could say.
But we do get some nice Takashi Shimura here in probably not his most memorable role, but a cool role nonetheless.
I appreciated his being here. I had no idea he was in the film prior, so...
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know he was in the film until I started watching it and I saw his name in the credits. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. Now, okay. So this is where I need to establish something. So this is a Daiei film.
Yeah.
Takashi Shimura, we know as a Toho actor. He's actually credited as from Toho in this film. Now, anybody who's like well aware of the Showa era understands the whole thought process of the studio actor system.
Right.
Where actors are specific to certain studios. They do not do stuff outside of that, right?
Right. I mean, I want to say America used to have that system as well in Hollywood.
Yes, it was the old Hollywood system, something that Toho or Japan would adopt.
Right, because the Japanese film industry kind of tends to adopt a lot of things from Hollywood.
Right. Now, the thing is, I don't know if anybody really knows the history behind it. And to correct my error, because in the MIFV episode, I say that there was an agreement made that they can cross over, that was very much wrong. In that, I credit Masashi Nagata for creating that idea, but actually he did quite the opposite. Just like how he came up with the idea for Golden Week, like we talked about last week, he came up with this idea to restrict actors to certain companies. So he is the reason to thank. He's the person to thank for having Shimura in the film because he paid Toho to have him. But he is, in fact, responsible for the 5 companies agreement, which was established August 17th of 1953. Now, Rex, this is where I go into a deep, interesting history. Do you want me to do that?
Yes. I'm curious about this.
So this agreement was between Toho, Daiei, Shin Toho, Shochiku, and Toei, 5 of the big Japanese companies of the 1950s. This agreement was formed after Nikkatsu announced productions would begin again following the end of World War II. Nikkatsu had ceased productions during the war, and finally in 1953 they were able to start producing stuff again. And they were building a new film studio called Tamagawa. Now, because of this, they were afraid of something called actor poaching. I will get into that here in a minute. Now, as I previously have established, this agreement did not allow other actors or directors or artists to move to another studio, period, no matter what. That would restrict Nikkatsu from being able to get people to their company because they had to start fresh, like fresh plate. They had no actors, they had no directors, they had to find people. And it would have been easier to pull experienced people because then you automatically get good movies. You're not banking on the idea of, oh, maybe this person's good, maybe they're not.
Right.
It also, in the clauses, it did not allow for lending of actors to other studios, such as Takashi Shimura going and doing a Daiei film. Now, one of the big reasons why they established this was because one of the people Nikatsu paid to work for them was a person known as Hoshino Wahe, who was an independent actor broker. That was his title. Who was known to pull actors from major studios. He was one of the main people who jumped on the mass exodus of talent from Toho, who eventually got Shin Toho made. And so Nikatsu would use him as a contracted producer starting in 1954. But he would join Shin Toho in 1955 until 1956 when, with the last collaboration being Yotsuya Kaidan. And he left Shin Toho because he could no longer poach actors under the 5-studio agreement that existed. Now, okay, this is where we have to go even farther back. So that's the establishment of the 5 companies agreement, the issue, and why it was made. So an important thing to note here is one of the reasons that this was made was because Masashi Nagata was viewed as a dictator. He's actually the reason that Akira Kurosawa left Daiei and went to Toho after he already left Toho and went to Daiei, after Rashomon specifically. Now, the reason for Kurosawa leaving and the reason for Shin Toho happening was due to the events known as the Toho Dispute that occurred from 1946 to 1948. These were strikes from Toho workers for things such as working hours and wages. During this time, various unions were formed. That all the major studios had their own unions for their workers. The union of Toho grew tired of the wages and working hours, so they boycotted and started a new union known as the Japan Film and Theater Workers Union. This would eventually grow and have various other people from the other unions, from like Daiei, Nikatsu, Shochiku, all join. Now, the Toho side of this union, the members of that grew tired of that union and split off and founded the National Cinema and Theatrical Workers Union, which that union is what established Shin Toho in March of 1947. Another name they used was the 10 Flags Association. Mm-hmm. And even after this, there would be at least 2 more unions that would follow. Actually, the Japan Film and Theater Workers Union, the initial one founded by the Toho staff, would be dissolved February 28th of 1952. This dispute led to the establishment of, get this, the Toho New Face program. Oh. This is where they got various actors and actresses into the Toho studio, such as Toshiro Mifune, Hiroshi Koizumi, Ren Yamamoto, Akihito Hirata, Akira Takarada, Kenji Sahara, and so many more, was due to these strikes. And this program led to even more problems. All of this led to the largest post-war labor dispute Toho has ever had. In 1947, Toho was forced by Allied powers to change their president due to the fact the current Toho president was a Communist Party member. They did this to push out communist influence, and under this new management, it led to a massive layoff that included 1,200 employees. This began what they call the third dispute at Toho, which started December of 1947. This included a mass boycott at Toho in April of 1948, which included 2,500 workers barricading themselves inside of one of Toho's studios, which then led to Allied forces showing up with 150 soldiers, 6 armored cars, 3 tanks, and 3 aircrafts, and 2,000 policemen from a local Tokyo station to end this boycott. It was a mess at Toho. And because of how messy Toho was, they only produced 18 films in 1948. This is why Kurosawa would leave Toho and go to Daiei. That's why people such as Akira Ifukube went to Daiei for The Quiet Duel. And people such as Takashi Shimura would go to Daiei. This was all pre-5 company agreement. They could jump to another studio and do other work. Toho was in such a disarray that Kurosawa went and did Daiei films and Shochiku films before going back to Toho.
Right.
On October 18th of 1948, so a couple months after this huge problem, a new agreement was reached between Toho and the unions that ended the dispute. Now, another dispute happened in summer of 1950, but it was really small. It was like maybe 50 workers, so they don't really talk about that. But what's also important is the disputes ending led to all of the people that left and founded Shin Toho. They came back to Toho. So then Shin Toho was left with no talent. So they had to figure out what to do, so they started poaching actors. And all of this happened around 1950. So Toho was already interested in establishing a exclusivity deal for their talent. So when this all came up, they were happy to sign that 5 company agreement because Shin Toho was doing it, and eventually Nikkatsu started trying to do it. Also, this is all important to note because all of this led to Toho being in financial ruin. They were in debt, they were trying to get their company off the ground, and with the 5 studio agreement signed in 1953, that meant in 1954 they could try to officially re-establish the company as the largest studio in Japan. What happens in 1954? 2 of the largest films in Japanese history, Seven Samurai and Godzilla. What's so important about those? That's the establishment of 2 of their biggest directors, Akira Kurosawa and Ishiro Honda, under the new studio agreement, making it so they're exclusive to that company. What happens after that? Box office hit after box office hit. So it's all fun and games until you realize, wait a minute, the talent's dried up. Toho has too many of the big hitters. Daiei has too many big hitters. So what happened is Toei and Shochiku started suffering from the 5 company agreements. So that ended up, and that was because members of other companies would go and work at Toei and Shochiku and Daiei, like Kurosawa did, and make films there when Toho wasn't doing too much with them. Now, this didn't stop some actors from ignoring the contract and still showing up and doing other films, right. But that was not what Takashi Shimura did here for The Whale God. So, because of the turmoil, specifically with Toei and Shochiku, it led to an amending of the agreement to allow actors and talents to cross over. This would begin in 1954 and go on until the dissolving of this agreement, which is why Takashi Shimura got to show up in The Whale God.
Mm-hmm. When did this agreement dissolve?
I'll get there. Nikkatsu would join in 1958, making it the 6 company agreement, which was a thing until 1961 when Shin Toho went bankrupt, returning back to the 5 company agreements. The 5 company agreement would end in 1971 when Nikkatsu left the film industry, started doing Roman pornos and low-budget, independent films. Toho ended its exclusive actor system because they started working more on TV, and they were trying to get as much as they could because the Japanese film industry was falling apart. Toei transitioned to TV, Shochiku focused more on kabuki, and at the end of 1971, Daiei went bankrupt. So while there was no official formal resignation of this 5 studio agreement, it ended as every company no longer was doing that thing. which lines up with how following 1971, and actually in 1971, you did not see your typical faces in the Godzilla films and whatnot.
Right.
So that's the history of the 5-company agreement, something we've all heard about, but didn't really know where it came from. And I think it's really interesting to realize, like, Daiei created this. Daiei is also the one that created Golden Week. So now we have 2 weeks in a row where we have something where Daiei is the one that, like, established it. Something that we now talk about and don't really connect to the Daiei brand.
Yeah, I had completely no idea about a lot of this history of the 5 studio system. I only just knew that it existed and had like vague and had an idea on like what companies were involved, and that was more or less the extent of it. Pretty much. Wow.
My biggest surprise was seeing stuff like the establishment of the Toho New Face program through this. I thought that was one of the coolest factoids, because that's how we got 90% of the famous tokusatsu kaiju actors.
Right. And I mean, you see similar systems to it nowadays, still getting actors in, say, like Godzilla -1 with Noriko.
Right. And that was something I was actually going to bring up. While the 5 studio system's no longer established, this same process is still used today, but with talent agencies, exclusivity. You only work for this talent agency. I think the famous one in the world of kaiju and tokusatsu is Johnny's, for like the Ultraman Tiga actor.
Right. There's a few other big ones, but Johnny's is probably one of the more internationally known ones. Largely due to their infamy, frankly.
So while, yes, it's good that this folded, but now you have so many more talent agencies that do the exact same thing. You can only appear in stuff that they do. You can only appear in things. I've actually had a little bit of a thing with this because I've worked with a couple actors that were under a studio or a talent agency. And so that's why friendship appearances are a thing. You sometimes see those in credits, friendship appearance by, you name it. And that's because they go outside of the studio system and they do, or a talent system at this point, and they appear, but you can't credit them for their talent agency, and the talent agency will refuse to acknowledge its existence. You have to label it as a friendship appearance. So there's your information dump of actors.
Kaiju Conversation, Japanese film history.
So hopefully you all learned something today about that. We've been mostly talking in our Whale God segment about things that aren't the Whale God.
Yeah, God, we've barely talked about the bloody film.
Well, you'll be happy to know that I have like 2 more notes, and that's going to be after the movie discussion's over. So I'm officially done with dropping facts on you.
Right, yeah. Well, let's transition back to the film, where in the sequence with the Elder that we were previously talking about, we soon get introduced to our secondary protagonist, I guess.
I'd say
Kishu.
antagonist.
Yeah, antagonist. Yeah, that's a better word for it, actually. Kishu. Which is not actually his name. He doesn't really have a name. He's just a drifter from Kishu.
Yeah, and he shows up and he's like, can somebody who doesn't live in the village get this land, get your name, get your daughter? And that's where we learn that, yeah, he absolutely will do that. So he pledges to kill the whale, following our main character, Shaki, pledging that he will kill the whale.
And then from there, we get some sequences in a bar where some various locals challenge Kishu to a brawl, I suppose, for the honor of sorts.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure why they have a bone to pick with him, outside of just, I guess, he's an outsider.
That was kind of my guess, but I wasn't entirely sure myself.
Yeah. But this fight does go to show us Kishu's a bit of a scumbag, particularly in how he fights. Well, how he fights isn't necessarily the worst thing he does, but it gives us our first hint to it.
Right, because he like beats up somebody pretty bad and then pours alcohol on their open wounds, which it stings.
Right. He's very scrappy, and it's very much a slug fight. And I mean, I don't remember if it's in this sequence, but I know at one point in the film, like he kicks someone in the balls to knock him down, to take him down.
Yeah, he just kind of does whatever he can do to get rid of people.
Right.
And it kind of goes to show just kind of how dirty he is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I do think that's very interesting to see them approach it that way.
I think the film does generally a good job at characterizing our two leads. I don't find them like the most compelling characters, but the film does a fairly good job at giving me an idea of who they are as people and being pretty consistent with it as well.
Right. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to really understand who's the good guy in this film and who's not.
Yeah, that's true.
They do a very good job at establishing our heroes and our villains.
Mm-hmm.
Which, speaking of the hero, following this, we do get another sequence with Shaki where his sister Yuki wakes him up, and she talks about the whole thing with her fiance. I'm trying to remember here.
The fiance who's going to Nagasaki to study to become a doctor.
I thought it was Shaki was doing that. Or no, you're right.
It's Kasuke.
Yes.
Who does that. Shaki's too obsessed with a whale.
That's right. Yeah, because
the central theme of the film is the obsession of the whale throughout the entire village, frankly, outside of Kasuke and Yuki.
Right, because even in the sequence...
And I guess A.
Yeah. Even in this sequence, we see that partially why Kasuke's leaving is because they say that the village has gone mad to kill the whale god.
Right. And that's something that the film makes very explicit, is that obsession. There is very few scenes with Shaki or the locals of Wadaura, the village, that don't. There's very few scenes with any of these characters that don't, in some way, shape, or form, mention or reference the whale.
Right.
Almost every scene mentions it in some capacity.
Right, and that's something that revenge films I've noticed often do, is have a very huge emphasis on obsession and just how that can destroy a human. It kind of goes hand in hand with revenge, because the whole idea behind revenge is somebody has done something so inhumane that now you have to avenge somebody by getting revenge. And then that revenge turns into obsession, which turns that person into an inhumane individual. And it's kind of the duality of revenge is just as bad as the occurrence that caused the revenge to happen.
Right, which this film definitely sort of reflects in that all that there really is to Shaki, the elder, and this village is this whale.
Right.
Shaki's life, he's given a meaning to his life outside of the whale, but he doesn't choose it. He helps later on when she goes through a forced pregnancy thanks to the actions of Kishu, but he still, at the end of the day, chooses his obsession with the whale.
Mm-hmm.
The elder throws everything away, has nothing other than the whale.
Yeah, and I think that says a lot. And I think I'm trying to remember. I think I've heard it in the context of, if Batman doesn't have the Joker, what's really left for him to handle? Or do you know what I mean?
I get the idea you're getting at.
Yeah, it's like eventually it's like it's that meme, that I think I've seen it with Ghidorah and Godzilla. We've been doing this forever and we will continue forever or whatever. But in this case, it's the whale god has always been there, and that this village only has that. And once that's gone, what really is there?
Right. And I do think it's really kind of poignant how the film gives Sharky something else to care about, something else, another reason to live, but it's not that he doesn't care about it, but he still just chooses the whale. I think that's a really interesting decision.
Right. It kind of reminds me, and I'm not, it reminds me of this kind of how Samuel Jackson's character in Skull Island is dead set on killing Kong. And even though he's given an extraction plan, he decides on not following through with that to kill Kong. And it ends up in the same fashion that that Sharky has, and that's death to the thing that you're trying to kill.
Right.
Spoiler alert at the end of this film.
Yeah, spoilers, he dies. R.I.P., bro.
But I do think it's very interesting just how wrapped up that this village is. Like, their whole existence is this whale.
Yeah. And it's even suggested that, their entire existence is the whale, because that's entirely what this village is known for, even outside of the village itself. The Elder mentions how that's what they're known for in other regions.
Right. And I remember, and this is another thing, thanks to Danny for bringing this up in that recording, there's a strong possibility that this is either a village that is going against the guidelines of whaling by this point in Japan, or this is just before whaling goes entirely, not entirely, but goes the way of the dodo and is no longer a popular concept in Japan.
Huh.
So, depending on the time period...
When did that happen?
That was, I want to say, if I remember right from what Danny said, it was late 1880s when that was popularized to no longer be a thing, because they were pushing as whales as these deities, these spiritual animals, to not be killed, which they very much do establish that this is a spiritual creature in the film. They very much give it a supernatural element, which makes me question that perhaps this is after that, and this is one of the rare villages that's still holding out against the social norms of whaling because of the whale god. But even then, Sharky suggests that his child that he has adopted will grow up to be a whaler.
Right.
Not ending the cycle, which I will talk about towards the end here because I have a whole thesis behind that one.
But yeah, I'm trying to recall where we were back in the plot now.
Well, Sharky leaves his home. He kind of visits the remains of some whales prior to, then we get kind of a cool shot. I love seeing, and this is kind of where we see some really cool shots using the camera. There's some really nice shots in here. I think this film does.
Oh, the cinematography is quite nice.
But we get a nice shot of the culture of the village, kind of singing and dancing while they work on stuff and prepare for the next appearance of the whale god. And I love every song and dance moment in this film. I think those are the highlights of this movie. But we do get, following this, more Takashi Shimura and his daughter Toyo talking to Sharky about killing the whale and the events that will happen following this. This is where we do get, Sharky leaves, and then we get a very devious plan. Toyo says that she's not going to marry Sharky. And then this is where the elder says, oh, it's fine. No matter what, even if the whale god is dead, Sharky will not come back alive.
Mm.
And he's determined that no matter what, he wants the whale god dead. He doesn't care if everybody in the village dies.
Right.
which in of itself is another obsession. He has an obsession with killing the whale god, even though he has no direct established beef, I guess you could say, with the whale god. He's just the head of this village that has seen death in it. But he wants to see, he doesn't care if he sees more death, he just wants to kill it.
Right. And we mentioned the cinematography just a minute ago, but I really like the cinematography and blocking in this sequence really stood out to me, and how they really show and contrast the more subdued performance and emotions of Toyo, his daughter, through the cinematography, and how much her disinterest in Sharky, for example. I really liked how they showed that in the film.
I agree. I really think this is one of those sequences that highlights just how beautiful the cinematography is.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And after this sequence is where we get the...
it's where we meet A, I believe.
Yes. Shaki meets A. They talk a little bit. This is where Shaki continues to spout the only thing he cares about, which is killing the whale god.
Yeah.
And then we get a very suggestive scene. It doesn't show anything, but the
implication is very clear.
Yeah. Do we really need to talk about it, or should we kind of just move on? What do you think?
Kishu rapes her. I'll just say it. Like, I don't think there's really a need to sugarcoat it. It's what happens. Very much establishing how the extent of how much of a scumbag Kishu is.
And then Kishu runs after Shaki, who's at a local bar, and then he tries to fight him there.
Yeah.
After we get some more, during this whole event, during the rape sequence and all that, we do get some shots of the village kind of glorifying the whale god, as one of the members of the village picks up a woman and says, "I found another whale."
Right.
And then she goes on to say, "Whoever kills the whale god can be with me." And then all the men, of course, will objectify her in that event. Which, kind of, again, the obsession, except for them, it's more of the lustful desires. We see a lot of different showcases of the seven deadly sins.
Forms of obsession.
Mm-hmm. Some of them are in it for, the fact that the head of the village says, "You will have my land, my name," that's power. That's money. That's personal gain, right?
Right.
And that's what Kishu's kind of after, is that personal gain. You have the villagers who are kind of lustful, or, kind of, there's a lot of showcases of what I would almost say are the seven deadly sins in here. Something that I think shows up a lot in revenge stories, these various versions of the same concept.
Yeah, I didn't think of the seven deadly sins. It is okay. Correct me if is the seven deadly sins, is that specifically a Christian thing, or is that
is a Catholic thing? But we do see in the film a chapel with a Catholic priest with a cross talking about God, and
there is a fair bit of Christian imagery, like in Shaki's home. Like there's a picture or something of Mary.
Mm-hmm. And he's in a coffin when he dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have a Christian marriage between Shaki and A.
Yeah. So I'm like, thinking about that, that's interesting. It's something I didn't really think about before, but no, it's...
Especially
don't entirely
when you
know what to make about it, but that's interesting.
Yeah, especially when you realize only about 3% of Japan is Christian. And Nathan suggested that this could be the influence of Moby Dick bleeding through, because there is a priest character in Moby Dick as well.
Okay, maybe. I don't know. I think that's another interesting layer that I'm sure could probably be analyzed a bit further, but I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what to make of it other than those observations.
Well, it's very interesting because we do see a couple. I mean, we get the Christian stuff. There's a little bit of that Shintoism, that kind of Shintoism kind of shows up in here. And there's definitely a lot of Japanese influences, especially with how they conclude the film. That goes straight from like Buddhist monks and Shintoism and the push of whales being these supernatural creatures. The idea of the whale god, something in Christianity is not giving things that aren't godlike power. So the whole concept of the whale god is against the Christian beliefs, which is it's a very interesting contrast to the heavy Christian imagery in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of why that stuff only shows up occasionally throughout the film, because it's not entirely meant to be something established in the film. It's kind of this side thing that continues to kind of loom overhead. It kind of establishes some of Shaki's personal beliefs and values, but we also see what happens when you have obsession, which is something that is not a good thing in Christian culture. So the way I view it is it's kind of establishing where Shaki should be, and kind of showcases that, not having an obsession over the whale god and whatnot, whereas Shaki is not able to find that bliss that he needs. He's too obsessed, which in the end costs him his life.
Right. And speaking of obsessions costing lives, pretty soon after this, Shaki's mother dies.
There's also a brief kerfuffle between Kishu and Shaki in the bar. But
yeah, there is that too. During her death, making sure to not forget about the village's obsession, she tells Shaki to talk to a man named Yohei, to find out the best way to kill the whale, essentially.
Yeah, and then we get kind of a time jump, I think.
Yeah, I want to say that's around here, somewhere around there.
I feel like this film doesn't do the best of jobs showcasing kind of the time jumps in the film.
I don't think it really hurts the film, honestly. I think it's fine.
I don't know. It is what it is. But during this, Kasuke comes back, and this is where we kind of get Shaki begging Kasuke to take Yuki with him back to Nagasaki. And then eventually, like, there's a whole swimming sequence in here. But eventually he does go off to visit the graves of his family members that have passed.
Right. Which afterwards he ends up just finding A, who is going through labor.
Which this is where he realizes that A has been raped. And in a very selfless manner, he proclaims that the baby will be Shaki's own, to protect A from getting any flack for having a child and not being married, which was a huge no-no.
Right, yeah. And then from there we also get a love scene with them. Again, Shaki fully has something that he totally could have lived for, but just that damn obsession with a goddamn whale.
Yeah,
whale that, mind you, really didn't do anything wrong as well. It just defended itself from the villagers hunting it.
Right. Yeah, and that's something I think that's worth noting is, like, the whale god, all the whale god really does is exist.
Right. It's an abnormally large whale. That's it. That was its crime.
And I think it does say a lot that, like, Shaki adopts this child, commits to marrying A, goes and tells the village elder in the following sequence, I'm this child's parent. Like, I think that's very good. I think it's really good to give Shaki that humanity. But what's really disheartening is, like, in all of these moments, it always comes back around and says that I'm going to hunt the whale god. That's all he lives for. It doesn't matter that he has a wife. It doesn't matter he has a kid. It doesn't matter. He's going.
Right. And that's his tragic fatal flaw, is that obsession. So it's almost Shakespearean in a way, which is funny when you realize that Shakespeare was one of the biggest influences on Moby Dick, and a character with that fatal flaw of obsession, Captain Ahab.
Yeah, Shockey is really the Captain Ahab of this story.
Yeah.
And, another interesting thing, talking about the Christian stuff, we do see that Shockey and A take the baby and have it baptized. Which, right after this, we do get a interesting sequence of Kishu and Shockey talking about the child, which I think is very clever. I love that. And I love how we kind of see Kishu kind of settle into this village. And we have these two kind of main stories, Shockey's obsession with the whale god and Kishu's greedy obsession with the whale god. And I do think...
Right. You also see a little bit of a different side to Kishu in this scene. He's a lot less sure of himself, very sort of awkward and nervous in this sequence for obvious reasons. But it's definitely interesting to see that difference in their dynamic in this sequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that helps build up a sense of pressure, because now, Shockey doesn't want Kishu to kill the whale god because that's his whole life existence. But Kishu now knows that Shockey has dirt on him and can easily take him out. And so it is a very interesting dynamic these two characters have that leads to kind of a very momentous conclusion following these two characters.
Following this, he is approached by Toyo, who wants to have a chat with him, feeling very insulted by his marriage of A.
Right, which... I don't know. The whole marriage thing, I just kind of...
I think it's kind of the weakest aspect here.
Right, because it just kind of feels like a back and forth of oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, how dare you. Oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, how dare you.
Yeah, a bit of a tsundere type deal, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm kind of 50-50 on it, because in some regards it does highlight that obsession with the whale at the end, where she says that even though she doesn't have any love for Shockey, she would still marry him because he did kill the whale. But at the same time, I don't know. It feels kind of underbaked. Maybe not underbaked is the word. It just doesn't work as well for me as say the stuff with A or Kishu.
I feel just kind of, it feels very disconnected, and I think a lot of it comes down to Shockey's never really invested in it, so why should I be invested?
Yeah, that might be a good way to put it, actually.
And even Toyo's not that invested until suddenly here.
Right. Yeah.
And A always seems again, A's connection to Shockey just never feels like it's fully committed, right? Because he's not committed.
Right.
He's committed to killing the whale god. He's not committed to the marriage.
Right.
So it's just this whole back and forth of, this is kind of, in a way you can kind of see from a mile away that no matter what, the women in his life don't really matter.
Yeah.
Even his mother, her dying wish is for him to kill the whale god.
Right.
And we get that same sentiment in the following sequence because Shockey visits Yoei, who you talked about earlier, Rex. And in this, Shockey's how do I kill the whale god? How do I do this? And Yoei's don't do it. And that your obsession of this will end up being your death if you do this. He very clearly warns Shockey that this is not a good way to do it.
Right, and that the whole village is mad about this whale for no sensible reason.
And I think that you bring that up because it's a great thing to bring it, because right after this, we get that the village has a telegram saying that Shatsu's coming back. And then the whole village goes into overdrive to get what they need to kill the whale.
Right. Yeah, and this kind of leads us to the setup for the final act, where whilst these preparations are underway, Sharky once again visits the grave of his family members, where he also gets confronted by Kishu.
And I think this is probably the best, because not only do we have the buildup of like the insanity of the village and the whale god is coming and the whole thing we've seen before this, we get one more interaction before they go into battle, right?
Right.
And I think this sequence builds up a lot of that tension that we feel throughout the finale.
And again, like, Kishu calls out Sharky for, don't die for nothing. Don't die over this obsession. You have don't throw your life away. I'm someone who's a dirty scoundrel, but you have something to actually live for. You're a father to this child. Right.
And I think it's a nice redemption, even though I don't think there's a way this character can redeem himself.
It's a character who does not deserve redemption, but he's not really redeemed. There's just nuance. It's a more nuanced character than just he's purely, completely just evil without morals, you know?
Right, because he brings the best point that I think Sharky hears throughout the entirety of this movie.
Yeah, this is probably just the best sequence, one of the best character sequences between the two, in the film as a whole.
And I think it's very interesting that Kishu even says, like, he's going to sell Toyo. He's not even interested.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it goes kind of back to the whole greed aspect, because Kishu's like, he'll end up getting the name, he'll get the land, right? He gets the power and he gets the land. So he gets the important thing. And perhaps the reason they include the Toyo line is for that redemption in a way, in air quotes.
It's also showing that he kind of has nothing, that it's kind of contrasting him and Sharky, where Sharky now, previously all Sharky had was his vengeance against the whale. That was all Sharky had to live for. But whilst now he has the wife and kid, inherently Kishu doesn't have anything to live for. He's like, he wants the money, he wants to have a good time, but he doesn't really have any long-term actual wants. He's just a drifter who goes town to town.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't actually have anything or anyone specific to live for. He's not of this village. So the obsession with the whale isn't even something personal to him.
Right. When I was watching, I very much felt kind of a resemblance to like Jaws, like Quint.
I felt that. I felt a bit of Quint, yeah.
Yeah, who's this? It's the same process. He floats in, he talks about the shark, he goes for the money, he dies, but the main character of Jaws has a family, a wife, children. You know, Brody is our main character, and he has stuff to live for. Hooper, not so much either. You know, in the book, Hooper does end up dying, and Quint dies, leaving Brody to go back to Amity, right? And I think that's very interesting, and that's something they changed in the film, of course, because Hooper was a more likable character in the film.
Yeah, they all were more likable characters in the film.
Yeah. But I kind of got the same kind of feeling from the Benchley book in this film, except our Brody character, you know, Sharky, throws away all of that to get the job done.
Right. And yeah, that's honestly, I really do like a lot of the character work in this film, specifically with the relationship between Sharky, Kishu, and A. I think it's really, really interesting how the story is told here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, you know, following this, again, we get another very entertaining sequence with the village prepping. You know, Sharky and Kishu, they have a little brawl. They end saying whoever wins, right?
Yeah, we'll see who wins tomorrow.
And that's kind of a haunting statement too. It's like, in a way, it's like the whoever wins, the other loses, because it either means they've died or they don't get what they want. Especially with the establishment from the village elder of whoever kills the whale god will probably die as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so whoever kills it will probably die. So if Kishu kills the whale god, Shaki doesn't get his payoff. His story's not complete. And Kishu will be dead. But if Shaki kills the whale, he dies, Kishu doesn't get anything, and nobody really wins.
Mm-hmm. And his wife and child are left to fend for themselves.
And I think the conclusion they go with is a better conclusion than either of those, because it's like, okay, literally nobody wins and nobody survives. I think that's a very dark way of, it's a dark outlook. And I like that.
Shaki gets the revenge he wants, but it ends up still being tragic.
Right. It ends with
this obsession
the cost.
Went so far that he chose losing his own life to this whale over raising a family, you know?
Mm-hmm. Over pretty much everything.
Yeah, essentially. And
so, like I said, we get a cool sequence with all the fishermen singing and dancing, preparing to go out on the hunt. Mm-hmm. This is my favorite sequence. This sequence right here, following into them into the ocean with the whale god, is the best sequence I think the movie has. It's certainly the most exciting. So we get them going off into the ocean, and in here, the way they signal that like the whale is here is with its water spout, which I thought was a really creative way to like symbolize the whale is there.
Yeah.
It's a cool little detail. And then we get the big finale, an hour and 17 minutes into the film. We have about 33 minutes left, and this final fight takes up a majority of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they throw their nets upon the whale, start harpooning it, and Kishu just goes for it, going to stab the whale at a vital point and eventually meeting his end.
Because he ends up getting stuck onto the whale, and the whale drowns him and doesn't die. And then Shaki, who's been stopped to just watch and see this happen, Shaki goes and fights Shatsu.
Right. Stabbing it many times on the top of its head.
And can I just say, they destroy this whale. Like, it's a bloody battle.
Oh, it's a bloody mess.
I was kind of surprised by just how gory they get with it.
Mm. I mean, it fits with the rest of the film, given the film was fairly real and, I guess, would gritty be the word to describe it? I don't know if it's.
I would agree.
I don't know. Gritty kind of implies something where it's like grounded but ugly. Where I wouldn't say this has that like super ugly look, you know.
But it is grungy.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if there's any real right word I'm looking for.
Real.
Shut up. You should never say that ever again.
Yeah. But you want to know what never happens again?
What, Shaki walking?
Yeah. I'm glad we were going for the same death joke there. Shaki dies and kills the whale god at the same time.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't die right here. We get a scene a bit later of him waking up in the village with his wife and the elder, where it's revealed that both his legs and I believe just one of his arms are broken.
Yeah, and then we get he requests to be hauled off to the whale's head that has been left on the beach to look at it. So they take him to the beach in a coffin, and then he asks to be alone with the whale as Shaki cries and tells, or not Shaki, as A cries over Shaki's body, telling him that he had a good fight and that...
and reveals to him that Kishu was her rapist, in which he reveals that he already kind of figured it during the final battle.
Which I thought they kind of already figured. I thought it was a little... This whole ending...
I kind of thought he already knew when he first introduced the baby to Kishu. Because I felt like he was specifically trying to agitate... I felt that was like the one moment where he was trying to specifically agitate Kishu.
Right, and then Shaki even tells A to forgive Kishu. And that's a little like...
That's a little weird. I get attitudes were a little different back then, but...
But this whole conclusion for them is just... I don't think it works. I think this is a very poor send-off for A and Shaki as a couple.
I think the tragedy element is good. I just could go without the please forgive Kishu.
Yeah.
Because, no, he doesn't deserve that.
No,
I'm fine with giving him nuance, but this is not a redemption arc for him.
Yeah. I'm right with you there. And, you know, this kind of ending is kind of weird because then, like, the village... Like, this is every character, it's like going up to him and saying their final goodbyes, pretty much. So A leaves, and then the village elder and Toyo comes up, and the village elder's like, you're going to be marrying Toyo tomorrow and getting my estate and my name. Mm-hmm. And then Shaki says no.
I mean, I think this ending works to highlight that the obsession is still... It hasn't ended with the whale's death. It's just a part of them. They're still going through with every part of the obsession. Shaki and the Elder, all they had to live for was the whale. So the Elder, like he promised, is giving everything away. And in Shaki's case, he dies. He dies having sort of just his obsession with the whale, just kind of having epitome that the whale is his life, declaring that he is becoming the whale, more metaphorically getting to that idea of the whale was all that he is.
See, I get that, but I also think, because in this we get a nice, like, overlay of another whale in the ocean. And the way I took it as, it's something that I think the film could be following. And, you know, Rex, you know as well as I do about how no matter what, you can't break a curse, right?
Uh-huh.
You know, you watch a videotape cursed, you can't escape that you're going to die.
Yeah, I'm going to die in 7 days.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, even though Shaki has killed the whale god, there must be another whale god. There must be another one, no matter what. So Shaki, who has killed the whale god, must now take its place and become the next whale god for the next whaler obsessed with killing the whale god.
I mean, regardless of that, the legend of the whale god just takes on a new form of the story of a man driven by obsession to kill it. The legend of it lives on in his legacy. His child now has to live without a father. And
one of his wishes is for his child to become a whaler.
Yeah.
And who's to say that he doesn't become obsessed with killing a whale?
Yeah. And again, and kind of going into that whole idea of the village being obsessed and the whale being all there is to the village is kind of, when you look at like what I mentioned about the changes in the book, where the whale god story is from a person doing research on the village and being told of this legend, the legend being spread, and writing the book on the whale god. That's essentially all the village is, I suppose.
Yeah, see, that's something that I really thought about, was when you brought up how the book is, it sounds like the legend of the whale god. It's like a folklore tale. It's like a...
Yeah, exactly.
And I love that, and I think that's something that maybe this adaptation is missing, is that level of folklore. that I think would really hammer home the idea of Shaki becoming the whale god. You know, it's more of a warning for the reader or for the audience member to not fall into the spiral of obsession. To not
I still think it works without that. It's just that framing device, I think, adds a whole another interesting layer to that, on top of all this.
It helps clarify the warning, the true warning of the story. And that's something that, you know, you do see that in a lot of ghost stories and a lot of supernatural stories in Japanese culture, is the warning of, like, don't do this.
Oh no, that's not even just Japanese folklore. That's a big thing in just folklore around the world. Is a lot of these creatures end up being, a lot of like cryptids and type creatures, they end up being these metaphors for different for moral lessons. And
I think this is a very good lesson, to be honest. I do. I think that this is something that it falls in line with the concept of obsession and revenge, right? Something that I think a lot of people have an issue with. Obsession can be taken and interpreted in many different ways. Addiction is an obsession, you know? And I think it's a very important message that they're trying to show here, you know? I think that the fact that the whale god in this, the folklore is, it's a family curse. The grandfather, the father, the brother, Shaki, and soon to be his son, all are cursed to be whalers, all are cursed to fight and kill the whale god.
Right.
Because the whale god is eternal. It cannot go away. I love that. I think this is a very cool story once you understand that context.
Right. But with that being said, I believe we've come to the end of the film.
We have. Do you have any final opinions on the film before we transition out of the film itself?
Well, for final opinions on the actual film, I think I'm generally quite positive on this film. I think thematically it was a really interesting watch. I found the characters fairly engaging. Like, I was a bit worried from the opening of the film when it just dropped me in and I just didn't care for what was happening in this opening sequence. But once the film lets itself breathe and actually introduces the characters, I think it's a fairly compelling narrative. It's not the most entertaining film, but generally I think it's well done. I just didn't get a lot out of the effects or action sequences with the effects, personally. I thought those were the scenes that did the least for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think The Whale God is an intense drama that follows an obsession and revenge, and the film really does a good job painting both of those as corrupt and not good outlooks on life. You know, I think Shaki is a pretty interesting character, and I think the showcasing of what's almost like a curse on this family lineage to die by the hand of the flipper of the whale god, akin to that of like a Yuri or, various mythological and folklore tales. I think that's really cool. And I love how the ending really showcases that now that Shaki has killed his curse, he now must replace that curse for generations to come. And I'm kind of with you. The effects aspect of this film, I think, is one of the lesser memorable moments. I think prior to the whale god is some of the coolest elements of the film. I think once we get the final battle, I think it's very memorable. But everything building up to that's really what establishes it as a memorable sequence.
Right. And I think it's very important to, if you're going to go into this film, don't go into it as, it's another super exciting kaiju action flick. That's not what this is. And I'm really glad I didn't go under it with those expectations. I had fair enough idea that this was... I didn't necessarily know this was a drama, but I had a fair idea that this probably wasn't an effects-led film.
Right. Now, that being said, I will say that I find it mildly difficult to stay interested in this film. I think you kind of have to be in a certain mood for it, because there is a lot of moments that if you're not engaged, you kind of check out.
Yeah, I can see that. I was definitely a bit... I had a couple of those moments, but I would chalk that up more to me being tired when I was watching it.
See,
but I could definitely see why some people wouldn't find this too I could see why some people wouldn't connect with this film.
Right. Yeah, see, I found myself frequently having to, I know the first time I watched it, I fell asleep. Second time I watched it, I kind of struggled to pay attention. Third time, I was golden. For this rewatch...
I found it enjoyable because of the characters, but if you're not... If you aren't actively engaging with the characters, then I don't think you're going to enjoy this film.
Yeah, exactly. This is not a film that I say that it's got good cinematography, but on a visual standpoint, this film cannot keep you interested. I think you have to be engaged enough in the story to really have that interest.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we're about done. So are you ready for I've got two more notes I kind of want to throw out there and then cast and crew.
Shoot away.
So, as we all know, the whale god hasn't really shown up. There is a ghost whale in the Great Yokai War Guardians, but that's not necessarily the whale god, right?
Right, yeah.
However, the whale god, there was at one point, Gamera was to interact with a abnormally large whale in Gamera 3, Revenge of Iris, that eventually got scrapped from the film. It was only in the script. However, Noriaki Yuasa, Nissan Takahashi, and Masayo Yagi actually co-wrote a planned book in 1995 where Gamera and the whale god did appear and interacted with each other.
Oh.
I don't know what that would have included. I feel like that's almost something that you can't really do, but I imagine it just would have been a little cameo moment.
Probably.
Now, are you ready for the cast and crew, Rex?
Yep. Go right ahead.
Starting with our cast, Kojiro Hongo, who played Shaki, was in The Demon of Mount O, Buddha, Gamera vs. Barugon, Return of Daimajin, Gamera vs. Gyaos, Gamera vs. Viras, Yokai Monsters Along with Ghosts, The Haunted Ghost, Gamera Guardian of the Universe, and M. Embalming. Shintaro Katsu played Kishu, was in Ghost Cat of Gojusan Sugi, Necromancy, The Ghost Cat, Cursed Wall, The Demon of Mount O, Buddha, Tokyo, The Last Megalopolis, and Zatoichi. He is Zatoichi.
He is the the man himself.
Shiho Fujimura played A, was in The Demon of... not The Demon. Return of Daimajin, The Snow Woman, Shinya Tsukamoto's Gemini and Inugami. Reiko Fujiwara played Okoma, was in Ghost Story Crying in the Night, Lantern, and Buddha. Moving on through your cast, you've got Michiko Takano, who played Yuki, was in Kaidan Onibi no Nemura. Takemura Yosuke played Kusuke. Kyoko Inami played Toyo, who was in Gamera vs. Barugon, which we covered last week. Koji Fujiyama played Shaki's brother, who was in Gamera the Giant Monster, Gamera vs. Barugon, Return of Daimajin, Gamera vs. Viras, Gamera vs. Zigra, A Haunted Turkish Bathhouse, Wolf Guy, and Bullet Train. Chiko Murata played Shaki's mother, was in Ghost Story of Kakui Street, Ghost Story Depths of Kasane, The Ghost Story of Yotsuya, The Ghost Cat Cursed Wall, The Ghost Cat of Omura Cressing. Ko Sujita played Shaki's father, was in The Invisible Man vs. the Human Fly. Kukiko Tachibana played Shaki's grandmother. Kanji Kawara played Shaki's grandfather. who was in Warning from Space. And then, of course, Takashi Shimura played the village elder, who was in Godzilla, Seven Samurai, Drunken Angel, Silent Dew, Rashomon, Idiot, Godzilla Raids Again, The Mysterians, The Three Treasures, Mothra, Gorath, Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, and Frankenstein vs. Baragon. As for your crew, of course, Akira Ifukube composed the film. He worked on all 3 Daimajin films, and a plethora of Godzilla and Kaiju movies that if I were to list, we'd be here for another 10 minutes.
Right.
Toru Mabota was your effects director, contrary to what the credits say. He worked on Warning from Space, Buddha, Ultra Q, Ultraman, Ultra 7, Kaiju Busca, Mystery Operation, Spectre-Man, Ultraman, Monster Big Battle, and Invisible Man vs. the Human Fly. Tezuko Tanaka, your director, was director of The Demon of Mount O, The New Tale of Zatoichi, Zatoichi on the Road, Zatoichi's Pilgrimage, The Snow Woman, Haunted Castle, and the Zatoichi TV show. Masakazu Nagata, your producer, president of Daiei, worked on Rashomon, Gate of Hell, Sancho the Bailiff, Warning from Space, Buddha, Gamera the Giant Monster, Daimajin, Gamera vs. Barugon, Return of Daimajin.
Nagata, not Masakazu.
Oh, sorry. There's I've seen it both ways. I don't know if it's a translation thing.
That sounds like a translation error.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Daimajin, Return of Daimajin, Daimajin, The Wrath of Daimajin, Zatoichi the Outlaw, Conflagration, Fires on the Plain, Zatoichi the Fugitive, Zatoichi's Flashing Sword, Fight Zatoichi Fight, Zatoichi's Cave Sword, The Snake Girl and the Silver-Haired Witch, Gamera vs. Virus, 100 Monsters, The Snow Woman, Kaiden Otsushina, Spook Warfare, Samaritan Zatoichi, Gamera vs. Guiron, along with Ghost, Gamera vs. Jiger, The Ghost of Kasane, and Gamera Super Monster. And then Kanto Shindo was your writer who worked on Onibaba, Kuroneko, Zatoichi's Pilgrimage, The Ghost of Yotsuya, and the Zatoichi TV show. So, we have 2 films now in our Kaiju Daiei month. Daiei Kaiju month, I guess it would technically be.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious. I will be honest here. My ranking changed during this discussion.
Oh, interesting. I would say from the sounds of that, it sounds like in this discussion, your opinion of Whale God went upwards.
Perhaps.
I see.
So what do you have at your number 2, Rex?
I'm going to have the number 2 as, I would say, The Whale God. Even though I think The Whale God is the more thematically interesting film to discuss. And I think there's a lot of really good filmmaking here. But at number 1, I have Gamera vs. Barugon, which I just frankly find more entertaining.
See, initially that was my ranking as well, Gamera vs. Barugon and then The Whale God. Because while I have a lot of complaints about Barugon, as you heard last recording, I felt like the colors and the cinematography is better.
I mean, you were a lot harsher on Barugon than me, so I suppose it makes sense.
But as we talked about it, even though The Whale God, I'm going to be honest, was kind of hard for me to sit there and be interested in this time around, I appreciate the better quality script that if I was engaged would be a lot more interesting than when I was engaged with Barugon and failing to stay engaged. So for me, it goes Barugon at number 2, The Whale God at number 1.
I forgot we didn't have to do a second ranking because this isn't a Gamera film.
Right. So we're...
I was thinking, there's a second ranking coming, but then I just remembered.
Yeah, no. This is kind of one of the outlier episodes for this month.
I don't mind. I'm happy to have finally gotten this one scratched off the watch list.
I already watched it, but I'm happy. I'm happy we've been able to cover it. I think this is a very important film. This one in Demon of Mount O, I just wish that would get a release here stateside.
See, I wish I could remember what happened in Demon of Mount O. I've seen it. I couldn't tell you anything about what happens outside if there's an ox like halfway through.
And a spider.
See, I don't even remember the spider. I know there were other creatures in it. I just don't remember what they did or what they were.
Well, I think with that, Rex, I'm looking here through my notes, and I don't have anything else really to bring up.
I've said my piece.
I've spouted off enough information, I think, for 1 week. And I think that
we've had a whale of a time.
Yes.
I said that earlier, but I'm going to say it again.
We really turned over a new flipper here.
I'm disappointed.
I guess I can say you're welcome.
So I guess now we wrap up, because I don't need any more whale puns.
I need to stop, because if I say any Matoba jokes, it's going to be pretty bad.
Oh, that one isn't even a whale pun. That's just... Oh, that's... Oh. Why do you do this to me?
I just want to see you die. I'm two for... There's two.
I'm stealing that pun. Someday.
We're gonna see by the end of this month which one of us died.
Well, probably you. You're gonna collapse at G-Fest from your workaholic habits.
Overworking and undersleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna ask if I can
spoil the surprise for yourself.
Sleep.
Shut up. Get to the outro before we have any more puns.
Well, I guess that means we can transition to the most noblest of podcasting traditions. Am I right, Rex?
Yes. Please, get rid of the puns.
Starting off, hello, I am Elijah Thomas, and I have a kaiju and tokusatsu problem, and a whale pun problem. I'm a part of the rotating hosts for Monsters with Attitude. You can check us out on YouTube, where we do monthly live streams talking kaiju entertainment. You can also head over to Facebook and join our Facebook group. It's a great place to talk with like-minded people. I'm also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine. Currently, I write for Kaiju United. And my writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. Outside of writing and podcasting, I also served as a consultant on the Titanic Creations officially licensed Younguri figure. Go to titanicCreations.com/Younguri to order yours today. I've also had the privilege to produce bonus features for SRS Cinema. I've worked on Yuzo, the biggest battle in Tokyo, Liverleaf, and working on the upcoming release of War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiron vs. Gora on Blu-ray. I even did an audio commentary for Yuzo. You can order all of those Blu-rays on srscinema.com. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and older YouTube videos, along with an ever-growing playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I do plan on getting some new videos out soon, so definitely check that out. I've also appeared in a kaiju movie, a little-known film called Zillafoot from 2021. I made a brief cameo in the film A Skywatcher number 2. It's got a rating of 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb, so if you want to watch more kaiju, you can buy the Blu-ray on srscinema.com or the DVD from any major online retailer, or just watch it for free on Tubi with ads, or get it on Prime. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at ET13_productions and my ex, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. Rex, where can we find you at?
Well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at Rexino, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram, Rex_Xeno. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
Don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't, that's actually very much a lie. I'm literally reading this off of a MacBook. But you can rate us on Spotify now. To stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, head over to www.kaijuconversation.com to find our episodes, social media, news, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook at the same handle. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually, we'll have original artwork on there, but until then, you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. Recently, there was a discussion about a Godzilla Dune crossover and what that would be like. It's a great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Kerchevsky on the channel. I definitely butchered his name, I'm so sorry. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found in the description below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following his podcast under the name Giant Monster BS on any podcast platform or on Twitter at Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to the second week of Daiei Kaiju Month. Episode 97 is in the bag. 3 more, and we're at the big 100. So stay tuned for that. Again, thank you guys so much. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt, there's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. Kaiju. Not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.